Today's topic is engage and retain. What can you do? In this episode, my coworker Ryan McShane will be exploring what you or I can personally do to help with retention of the best employees in our company. A known key to company success is key employee engagement. But what does that mean? Let's jump right in. Welcome back to Brain Chatter, where we listen past the daily noise and explore topics at the intersection of leadership, workplace culture, profit, and sustainability. I'm your host, Derek Brown. Welcome back to Brain Chatter, Ryan. Thank you for sharing your time a second time.
Delighted to be here. This is an exciting topic, talking about engagement with my background in 20 plus years in HR and, many more in organizational development as well. This is something that's certainly near and dear to my heart, but I think it's also going to be really valuable information for anybody working and leading today.
Ryan, every company with any good sense at all wants to retain its best employees. And that means those who perform the best now and those who have the potential to most positively impact the company in the future. So here's my first question to you, Ryan. When we talk about employee retention, who is it exactly that a wise company wants to retain?
Well, Derek, I think it's as simple and at the same time as complex as this. Companies want to retain those who embody the characteristics of an ideal team member. For example, how would you describe the persons you most would like to work with? Would you use terms like honesty, committed to achieving goals, trustworthy, dependable, collaborative, respectful, and even maybe a good sense of humor? It's simple to think that the company wants to retain are those who embody these characteristics. And these characteristics not only translate to team cohesion, but ultimately team performance. The individuals and teams who possess the aforementioned characteristics are high performers, typically speaking, and those we want to retain for their competitive edge for the company's success.
Let's talk about engagement. Why does engagement connect to key employee retention?
Engagement directly connects to the feeling of being valued, and everyone has a need to feel valued. However, not every company recognizes this need or the methods of even honoring this need in others. It stands to reason that it's very difficult to leave an environment in which someone feels valued, not just for what they can do, but for who they are. In other words, I'm not likely to leave an environment that values me, and I feel that I'm valued. According to our founder, Dr. Ken Chapman, and the author of the Leader's Code, we all have a need to be valued and make sense out of things. When employees feel valued, they earnestly want to stay in that space that honors them and the value that they bring to the team and the work that they perform. I can share two personal examples from my own career if you'll indulge me. First, I was told by a supervisor very early on in my career that she could not respect me due to my age. Do you think I felt valued? Certainly not after that. My age is nothing I could control, and that was only how that person viewed me. Not my performance, not my ideas, not who I was beyond all of that. Well, as you might have guessed, I did not stay much longer after that experience. I didn't feel valued. Now, I had a second experience that I had that was much different, and not too long after the first, where I was told by my supervisor that I was recognizably a genuine person who wanted to grow, achieve, and make a positive impact for the company, that I had the capability to do all those things and much more. In that moment, I felt seen. I felt valued, and my commitment to the company and that supervisor only grew. I felt like I found home in my work and in the company I was working for.
Quite an insightful contrast. So, what are the absolute most important and practical ways to engage a high value member of your team that does make them do what you just said, makes them want to stay with the company?
I think it comes down to this. We need to ask employees what they think, and most importantly, tend to their answer. Little is more disengaging than to ask people what they think and then not pay attention to their answer. It tells the employee that the person asking is only giving lip service to the question and could care less about the actual answer. And even worse, care less about the person giving the response. When we ask others what they think and tend to their answer, we honor the person and their experience. That person feels seen and valued, not just for what they know, but for who they are. Secondly, another engagement factor is found in providing for and allowing an employee to have a voice for the things that affect them. This gives the employee a sense he or she has an influence or a say in how they operate at work. Generally speaking, as adults, we don't like to be told what to do. We want agency over our lives and therefore a say in how we operate. People who have a say in how they carry out their work are generally more motivated and engaged because, after all, it's something that they desire, not something that has been thrusted upon them and told they must comply. Giving your people a voice in the things that affect them will garner more commitment to the company and how they operate. For example, a company may have a difficult decision about making budget cuts. Typically, this decision will be made by one or two people at the top and have an effect on nearly everyone. However, if the approach were taken to involve those persons in which their budgets may be affected, gives them a voice in how the budget will be cut. Not only do those closest to the work have valuable insight on where cuts can be made, also, what is absolutely critical to be retained in the budget for the company and stakeholder benefit. There's a practical element of giving a voice as it pertains to operations, while there is also a personal element of honoring those who operate the budget to share their opinions on what should be kept and what should be cut. Think of the reverse. Executives trust you to operate within the budget, but won't consider your input on how best to reduce that budget in hard times. Does that make logical sense? No, it typically diminishes the trust between executive management and frontline management, which only trickles down to frontline staff feeling like they don't have a voice in what affects them.
So we're talking about practical sides of things. What is an effective engagement strategy that you would recommend on a day-by-day basis that you have seen as effective over your career, Brian?
Beyond asking people what they think and providing an opportunity to share their voice on things that affect their work, which creates conditions where employees feel valued and respected, I would offer the second part of what all people need. And this, again, is according to our founder's book, The Leader's Code, is to make sense out of things. For example, setting expectations. Having clearly understood tasks and goals are a part of making sense out of things at work. Yet just having clear expectations, tasks, and goals are not enough. Individuals need to understand the big picture of not only how these things are good for the company, but how these things are good for the employee too. I think most employees implicitly understand that their work supports the company, but they also need to see clearly what they do directly impacts the mission and vision of the company. By seeing the direct connection in each of their professional roles to the company mission provides a clear sense of meaning and purpose by the individual, helping them to make sense out of their role and the contribution to that role. By enabling our employees to make sense out of things, leaders can provide for the vital need we all have for meaning and purpose in our lives. It's also important to recognize that meaning and purpose consequently provides motivation to keep going and overcome inevitable challenges as we continue to grow and level up. Where there is growth, you'll likely find engagement as well. When we are successful overcoming challenges, this provides an additional sense of accomplishment that further motivates workers. Leaders, we have a responsibility to create an environment where employees feel valued by asking them what they think and allow for and even encourage their voice for what affects them. To also enable employees to see the big picture and how they fit in both professionally and personally. Companies who get this and live by it create engagement and retention of high performers who ultimately win together.
So we know everybody has a lot going on every day. That includes team leads, supervisors, managers, executives. All of those people have a lot going on as well. There is the expected that we expect to encounter every day in our work. And then there are all those hot fires that pop up every day, the things we maybe didn't see coming at all, or we knew would come up at some point, and now we're dealing with them today. How can a company leader really what can a company leader do to keep engagement high even through all the moving parts of an average stressful day? How can they make sure that they keep this as a priority amongst all those hot fires?
Yeah, great question. I think the hot fires seem to become the norm these days. And as one would schedule important tasks in their day to day, we would suggest also scheduling time to connect with staff rather than slate this as an activity that you just do when you have extra time, because it seems like we don't always have that luxury of extra time. But if you schedule something, it's more likely to happen. So, one method of connecting with staff that I've seen work really well is conducting regular one on one meetings with staff. The frequency is really going to depend on the environment and the operational demands. But I would suggest considering weekly or every other week, or at the very least monthly, to maintain and develop those relationships and that sense of connection with your colleagues, on top of continuously monitoring goal achievements.
So when you think about language and timing, both of those are important. When you think about the verbiage that a well-meaning company leader can use to engage, what does that language usually sound like? For instance, phrases that represent goodwill-oriented engagement, to make sure that it doesn't come across as, "Oh, I don't trust you," or "I'm condescending towards you." What kind of language builds in goodwill and effectively communicates that? And when does it normally happen in an average workday?
Sure. The language of executives promoting engagement has to strike a good balance between what's good for the company and what's good for the individual. Staff need to know that they're being considered in all decisions and how that work is accomplished. For example, a general manager of a manufacturing company may learn that they just landed a new contract. But in order to fill that contract, they'll need staff to perform overtime. Generally speaking, after a long week of work, staff do not want to hear that they'll be expected to perform overtime. Obviously, overtime will help the company achieve its contractual obligations and goals of satisfying the demand of the customer. So consider how this too may benefit the employees. Focus on the success of securing a new client and what that means for the employee. The unexpected overtime will provide additional take home pay for the employee. The securing of a new client may even impact bonus structures and incentive pay for staff. Speaking to what could this additional take home pay do to help staff accomplish their personal goals also honors the balance between what's good for the individual and what's good for the company. So, a specific example of that, the manager who realized overtime is needed, the manager might consider phrasing the conversation like this. I know the overtime can be stressful with all the areas of your work and personal life that you're balancing. We don't want this level of overtime to unbalance your life regularly. I do hope that the added overtime pay will help you and your family meet additional financial goals that you have. Then genuinely listen to their response. This gives them an opportunity to really contemplate what you've shared, and it tells them that you're concerned about the balance between what's good for the company and what's good for the employee.
So when you think about everything that we've talked about so far, would you consider engagement a habit that someone needs to form in a leadership role, or is it something different from a habit?
The way I view engagement is generally speaking, that extra discretionary energy we bring to our work because of how we feel about the importance of the work and the sense of accomplishment we derive from being successful in meeting our goals that lead us to accomplishment of the vision that we believe in. And engaged workers are also committed to the work. Committed people are engaged, and engaged people are committed. The what, the mission and the vision, provide the meaning and the purpose. The how and how we achieve and accomplish our goals towards the mission and vision provides the daily motivation to achieve. Like anything, we can habituate the behaviors that lead to engagement that we've discussed. But I'd say it's much more than tactical, and it even goes beyond strategic. Engagement is personal. Engagement activates personal motivations and aligns them to company goals.
So far, Ryan, we've been talking about engagement as really something that is needed for people who are in formal leadership roles. That might be supervisor, manager, executive, whatever it may be. But is it in fact something, engagement, that only belongs in the hands of formal leaders in an organization? Or is it something that is also in the best interest of non-management members of the company to use as a strategy as well?
Yeah, well, supervisors and managers have a dominant impact on engagement by defining the what and much of the how of accomplishing organizational goals that guide staff towards mission and vision. I'd suggest that it is each and everyone's responsibility in the company to seek out an understanding of how does the work that they perform aid them and their families. Seeing the direct connection between the work and accomplishment of personal goals provides the motivation to become engaged, not just for them, but for the company. Helping the company to achieve its goals also becomes a personal motivation for those who desire to be a part of something bigger than themselves. And we know that that's a part of who we are. Many of the companies we work with provide vital infrastructure that serve their communities. We can derive a great sense of meaning and worth knowing that we've helped our communities prosper. Practically speaking, employees can exhibit engagement by offering expertise and suggestions. For example, as an employee, you may approach it something like this: would it be okay if I shared an idea I've had with you? Or, I've noticed something in my work here on the front lines that I thought might be helpful to you in the company. Would it be okay if I shared this with you? Notice the emphasis on the politeness and consideration of the presentation of ideas and observations. In turn, positions employees as coming from a positive contribution viewpoint, not as a judgmental or complaining viewpoint. And I think this speaks volumes in terms of the relationship between, frontline employees and management, and that we share an equal role in engagement.
Ryan, let me pause briefly. Some of those listening have heard me introduce you before if they've listened to the previous episode where you were the expert guest. And some of the listeners may not have heard your introduction, but allow me to introduce or reintroduce you to everybody now.
Sure.
Ryan has been serving the human resources profession for over 20 years. He's worked in the public, the private, and the not-for-profit sectors. He's delivered in-person and virtual learning experiences to create high-performance leaders and organizations. Ryan is a past two-term president for the largest local SHRM chapter in the state of Maryland, Chesapeake Human Resource Association. Ryan holds an MSA from Central Michigan University in Human Resources Administration and a BA in Labor and Industrial Relations with a minor in psychology from Pennsylvania State University. Ryan's experience also includes adjunct faculty professorship for the University of Maryland System's Towson University, University of Maryland, Baltimore County, Community College of Baltimore County, as well as McDaniel College and York College of Pennsylvania. Ryan resides in Pennsylvania with his wife and his two children. Ryan, clearly you have a lot of experience. When you think back over your lifetime of work so far to times where you've observed a company leader who was highly skilled at engagement, what was it that set that person apart? And what did that person do consistently that set them ahead of the norm?
Good question. I think that the most engaging leaders impart a feeling to every individual that they matter. They demonstrate that they see the person not just for what they can do for the company, but who they are as a person, and recognize not only their professional interests, but also their personal interests, and actually tend to helping them accomplish both their professional and personal goals, as well as the company goals.
So, in a previous podcast episode of Brain Chatter, which was episode 32 with Patrick Frazier from ME Global in Arizona, they're a foundry company, we discussed the importance of strong pre-hire and onboarding strategies as it relates to retention. If someone hasn't yet heard that episode, you may want to go back and listen to it. Ryan, once we have a high potential person inside the company who we hope to retain, and assuming the pre-hire onboarding and career pathing has already been done to set that person up for success, what should be the next thing that their new direct supervisor should do to set the tone of engagement from them from the very beginning?
Well, I think a direct supervisor should set the tone of engagement by honoring the person. For example, something that could be said to do that is, we are excited to have you aboard the company and to see what your talents and expertise can do here. By hearing this as a new hire, you feel honored for who you are, what you bring to the table, and it sets a tone for inviting them to step into the role fully, sharing their talents and their expertise. You've heard the statement, people do not care what you say until they know that you care. This emphasizes the importance of genuine care and empathy in relationships. And it suggests that true influence and connection come from showing genuine concern for others rather than just the knowledge or expertise that they can offer. This quote's attributed to various figures, including Teddy Roosevelt, and highlights that people are more likely to listen and engage with those who demonstrate a caring attitude towards them.
Certainly matches my experience. So we're getting near the end of our episode. And before we do, I'd like us to just take a look at all of this from the opposite negative perspective. What would you say, in your experience, is the number one engagement killer or destroyer in the workplace?
I love this question. I think not being seen as an individual. We've heard this characterized as the feeling of just like a number. Environments that treat you like just a number, or even worse, easily replaceable, will very rarely, if ever, experience engagement. Engagement, again, is that extra discretionary energy we give in our roles because we believe what we do matters and we are valued in doing the things we do. Engagement starts at the individual level and projects outward toward achievement of organizational goals.
Ryan, thank you so very much for sharing your insights and expertise with us today on the podcast. If it's okay, I will share your LinkedIn in the show notes at brainchatterpodcast.com so that anyone who wants to connect with you can do so.
Great.
Excellent. Brain Chatter is a production of Ken Chapman and Associates Incorporated. We assist clients across North America and beyond with leadership development, corporate culture transformation initiatives, behavior-based professional development for health and safety issues, human resources services, individual and team assessments, conflict and performance management, succession planning, and team building, among other services, making a difference in organizations and individuals' lives for over 40 years. Learn more at leaderscode.com. And please consider ranking and reviewing us wherever you listen to podcasts. The more reviews or rankings we receive, the more the algorithms recommend us to new listeners. Thank you for your valuable time.